They called it a trial of worth, but it was a culling. Phaedra Prime was a gift, wrapped in teeth and lies. The stars had always been liars. The Galactic Compact had polished its surface to a sheen, jewel-toned forests, rivers of liquid starlight, skies that hummed with auroras, but its beauty was a snare. The Council of Nine did not grant worlds. They curated them, seeding each with horrors tailored to test a species' worth. When humanity's turn came, there were no warnings, no negotiations. Only 7 strangers stripped of memory, dumped into the wilds, and a timer ticking down to extinction. The rules were simple. Survive the planet's wrath for 1 cycle, and Earth would claim Phaedra's riches. Fail, and humanity would vanish like smoke. But the Council omitted the finer details, how the air thickened with pheromones that preyed on doubt, how the terrain shifted to mirror hidden fears, how survival demanded more than grit. It demanded a sacrifice, the parts of themselves they'd cling to most. Phaedra Prime greeted the humans with false serenity, amber skies, forests that hummed with predatory grace, and rivers of molten silver. The Council of Nine watched, their verdicts etched in cold arithmetic. Adaptability, 43%. Ruthlessness, 89%. Empathy, 2%. But they ignored the outlier in the data, the woman who paused mid-flight to bury a stranger, the man who traded his only weapon for a child's name. Flaws, the Council sneered. Weakness. Some truths were too volatile to record. They did not know they were being measured not for their prowess, but for their corruption. For the Compact's oldest law, to rule a paradise, you must first become its monster. They did not see the truth. Humanity's rot and resilience were twin seeds in the same soil. And Phaedra Prime, with its shifting laws and hungry shadows, was about to learn which would bloom. The first death came swiftly. The reckoning would not. The stars watched, unblinking. And the planet hungered. Chapter 1. The first thing Jaxon felt was the cold. It seeped into his bones, sharp and metallic, as if the air itself were made of knives. His eyes snapped open to a sky that wasn't a sky, a swirling dome of violet and indigo, pulsing with veins of bioluminescent gold. He lay on a spongy, moss-like ground that glowed faintly turquoise where his fingers pressed into it. No sun, no moon, just that throbbing alien canopy. He sat up, head pounding. No memories, no name, only fragments, a flicker of muscle memory as his hand twitched toward a weapon that wasn't there. Others stirred nearby. 6 figures, all strangers. A woman with a shaved head and a scar cutting down her left forearm groaned, clutching her temples. A lanky teenager with matted black curls crouched nearby, her pupils dilated with terror. A man with broad shoulders and a broken nose muttered in a language none of them understood. "Where?" the scarred woman began, but the word dissolved into a gasp. A sound tore through the air, a high-pitched screech, like metal grinding against bone. The group froze. The forest around them rustled, leaves shivering in shades of crimson and cobalt. Something moved in the undergrowth, a skittering, many-limbed shadow. Jaxon's body reacted before his mind. He rolled sideways as a creature lunged, a 6-legged insectoid horror, its exoskeleton iridescent black, mandibles dripping viscous fluid. It landed where he'd been crouching, hissing. The scarred woman scrambled backward, but too slowly. The creature pivoted, its barbed tail whipping out. The strike was surgical. The tail pierced her throat. She choked, blood bubbling over her lips, and collapsed. The teenager screamed. The creature turned its faceless head toward the sound, antennae twitching. Jaxon didn't think. He grabbed a rock, jagged, glowing faintly green, and hurled it. The rock struck the creature's thorax with a hollow clang. It recoiled, hissing, then scuttled into the shadows. Silence. The teenager stared at the corpse, trembling. The man with the broken nose vomited into the moss. Then the voice. It came from everywhere, the air, the ground, the inside of their skulls. Gelatinous, genderless, and cold. Observation log 227. Subject designation, human gamma 12. Status, deceased. Survival interval, 8 minutes, 14 seconds. Jackson's fists clenched. Who's there? Remaining subjects. 6. Adjusted parameters. Survival threshold set at 24 hours. Planetary cycle. The teenager staggered to her feet. What the hell is this? Where are we? Assessment criteria. Adaptability. Cooperation. Resource utilization. A hologram flickered above the dead woman's body. A rotating symbol. 3 interlocking rings. Burning gold. Success grants custodianship of designated resource colony. Phaedra Prime. Failure guarantees extinction. The hologram vanished. The group stood frozen. The broad-shouldered man wiped his mouth. This is a game, he rasped. They're watching, making us jump through hoops. Jaxon ignored him, staring at his own hands. Calluses, scars, a body trained for violence but no memory of it. Who am I? The teenager hugged herself. We need to move. That thing, it'll come back. And go where? Snapped a wiry woman with close-cropped grey hair. We don't know this place. No food, no water, no weapons. Jackson's eyes narrowed. The forest ahead sloped downward into a ravine where mist swirled in unnatural hues, sickly yellow, neon pink. Beyond it, jagged obsidian cliffs loomed. We follow the terrain, he said. High ground, better sightlines. Says who? The grey-haired woman spat. You some kind of soldier. Was he? He didn't know. The teenager stepped between them. Arguing won't help. My name's Nyra, I think. Blank stares. It's the only word that feels right, she whispered. The broad-shouldered man snorted. Cute, I'm Jayek. That's Vela. He nodded at the grey-haired woman. Don't care about the rest of you. Jaxon said nothing. Names meant nothing here. They moved in fractured silence. Nyra stayed close to Jaxon, her breath shallow. The forest thickened, trees twisting into archways of glowing coral. Strange fruits hung from branches, translucent orbs filled with swirling liquid. Jayek reached for one. Don't, Jaxon said. Why are you my keeper? Jayek plucked the fruit. It burst in his hand, spraying acidic sap. He howled, flesh sizzling. Nyra recoiled. We need to bind that, now. With what? Vela snapped. Nyra yanked a strip of cloth from her sleeve, frayed but clean. Here, pressure stops the burn from spreading. Jayek scowled but let her wrap his hand. Jaxon watched, uneasy. The girl moved with precision, no hesitation. Medic, scientist. The group trudged onward. The ravine deepened, mist curling around their ankles. Jackson's boots sank into the moss. Too soft, too quiet. A vibration, faint, beneath his feet. Stop, he hissed. They froze. The ground erupted. A serpentine creature, all segmented plates and razor-edged fins, shot upward. Its maw gaped, rows of teeth spinning like drills. Vela screamed as it dragged her under. Chaos. Jayek bolted. Nyra stumbled, fell. Jaxon grabbed her arm, hauling her back as the creature resurfaced, Vela's blood staining its jaws. Observation log 227. Subject designation, human theta 7. Status, deceased. Survival interval, 43 minutes, 2 seconds. Run, Jaxon barked. They ran. The mist thickened, stinging their eyes. Nyra coughed, doubling over. Jaxon pulled her behind a boulder. Jayek and the others had vanished. Breathe through your sleeve, Jaxon said. The mist is toxic. She obeyed, her eyes streaming. How did you know? He didn't answer, didn't know. The voice echoed again. Adaptability threshold exceeded in subject Gamma 3. Note, elevated threat response. Gamma 3, Nyra muttered. That's you. Jaxon peered around the boulder. The mist began to clear, revealing a clearing ahead. A stream cut through it, water shimmering silver. We need water, Nyra said. Could be poisoned. I can test it. She crawled forward, pulled a hollow seed pod from a bush and dipped it into the stream. The water inside turned faintly blue. It's safe, see, No reaction. He frowned. How do you know that? She hesitated. I don't. They drank greedily. The water was cold, sharp, alive. Jaxon's head cleared. A roar shattered the calm. Jayek burst into the clearing, face bloody. Behind him, the insectoid creature from earlier and two more. They're herding us, Jayek screamed. Jaxon shoved Nyra toward the cliffs. Climb. Climb what? The obsidian rock face was sheer, but fissures spiderwebbed its surface. Handholds, maybe. Nyra went first, fingers scrabbling. Jaxon followed. Jayek hesitated, then grabbed a ledge. The creatures circled below, mandibles clacking. Observation log 227. Subject designation, human Zeta 4. Status, deceased. Survival interval, 61 minutes 8 seconds. One of the creatures leapt, latching onto the cliff. Its claws screeched against stone. Higher, Jaxon yelled. Nyra's foot slipped. Jaxon caught her wrist, hauling her up. Her pulse thundered against his grip. Jayek wasn't so lucky. The creature's tail lashed out, piercing his calf. He fell with a guttural cry, swallowed by the pack below. Subject designation, human Kappa 9. Status, deceased. Survival interval, 63 minutes 22 seconds. Jaxon and Nyra reached a ledge. The creatures couldn't follow, for now. Below, the horde devoured Jayek. Above, the cliffs stretched endlessly. Nyra curled into herself, shaking. Why are they doing this? Jaxon stared at the holographic symbol flickering in the distance, the Council's emblem. To see if we'll become monsters, he said quietly. Night fell. The bioluminescent forest darkened, the sky now a bruise of black and deep purple. Alien stars blinked awake. And the voice returned. Final challenge commences at dawn. Prepare. Nyra's breath hitched. How many are left? Jaxon didn't answer. He already knew. 2. Chapter 2. The ledge was barely wide enough for two. Nyra pressed her back against the obsidian cliff, knees drawn to her chest. Her breath fogged in the frigid air. Below, the creature's mandibles clicked in the dark, a relentless, chittering metronome. Jaxon crouched at the ledge's edge, peering into the gloom. His hands kept flexing, as if aching to wield a weapon he couldn't remember. We climb higher at first light. We'll fall, Nyra said. We'll die if we stay. She stared at him. The bioluminescent forest cast his face in jagged shadows, turning his sharp features into something feral, a killer's face, or a survivor. She couldn't decide. The voice boomed again. Final challenge parameters. Sunrise initiates predator convergence. Survive until zenith. Nyra flinched. Predator convergence. Jaxon didn't answer. His gaze tracked the cliff face, sheer, glassy stone veined with pulsating amber filaments. He reached out, brushed one. It recoiled like a startled worm. Don't touch that, Nyra grabbed his wrist. Too late. The filament lashed his palm, leaving a smoking welt. Jaxon hissed, yanking back. They're defense mechanisms, she said, surprised by her own certainty. This whole cliff, it's alive. He scowled, sucking the burn. How do you know? I don't, not really. It's just a feeling. Feelings get people killed. The night deepened. Alien constellations wheeled overhead. Nyra's stomach growled. She plucked a fist-sized fungus growing from a crevice, pale, spongy, reeking of ammonia. Jaxon knocked it from her hand. You'll poison yourself. We need to eat. Not that. He nodded at a cluster of bulbous growths farther along the ledge. Those. The pods resembled bloated ticks, their membranes translucent. Foul black liquid sloshed inside. Nyra gagged. You're joking. Jaxon ripped one open. Thick syrup oozed out. He drank. Wait. He didn't die, just grimaced. Protein, minerals, tastes like rot, but it'll keep you alive. How could you, possibly? I don't know. He threw another pod at her feet. Eat or don't. She forced down 3 mouthfuls. It burned like whiskey, warmed her core. Silence stretched, then. You've done this before, Nyra said. Jaxon stiffened. The way you move, fight, even your instincts about the pods, you're a soldier, or were. He stared at his scarred hands. If I was, I'd remember. Would you? The question hung between them. Somewhere below, a creature shrieked. Dawn came violently. The sky tore open in streaks of sulfur yellow. The cliff shuddered. Move, Jaxon hauled Nyra upward, as the ledge crumbled. They climbed like spiders, fingers raw. The amber filaments writhed, avoiding contact now. Nyra's theory confirmed. The voice. Predator convergence active. Subjects Gamma 3 and Delta 2. Commence survival protocol. The forest exploded. Creatures surged from every shadow, insectoids, serpentine burrowers, winged horrors with hooked talons. They swarmed the cliff, claws screeching against stone. Jaxon kicked a 6-legged hunter in its photoreceptor cluster. It fell, taking 2 others with it. Faster. Nyra's foot slipped. She dangled one-handed, screaming as a winged predator dove. Jaxon grabbed her belt, yanked her onto a narrow outcrop. The creature's talons grazed her scalp. Blood dripped into her eyes. Left, there's a cave. He didn't ask how she knew, just followed. The cave mouth glistened with mucus-like strands. Nyra plunged through, Jaxon at her heels. The strands clung, elastic and sticky, but didn't harm them. Inside, darkness, the stench of decay. Nyra gagged. Something died here. Something big, Jaxon edged forward. A click. Fluorescent moss flared to life, revealing the cave's grotesque secret. The half-eaten carcass of a creature larger than a hover truck. Its ribcage formed a shelter. Its hollowed skull glared from the far wall. Nyra stumbled back. What killed it? Something worse. The voice interrupted. Adaptability threshold exceeded. Resourcefulness notable. Cooperation minimal. Jaxon kicked the carcass. Shut up. Nyra crouched, examining the moss. This strain, it's bioluminescent but cold, no fire risk. She scraped some into a pod shell. Light we can carry. Jaxon watched her. You're not a medic. What? Medics stitch wounds. You synthesize, engineer. She hesitated. Maybe it's like equations in my head. No numbers, just shapes, connections. A roar outside. The cave trembled. Jaxon peered through the mucus veil. The swarm circled, frenzied. They won't enter. Why? Nyra touched the carcass. This thing, they're scared of it, or what's left of it. He unsheathed a bone shard from the carcass. Then we take pieces, weapons. Wait, Nyra pressed her palm to the carcass's hide. It disintegrated, revealing a metallic spine. Cybernetics. This wasn't an animal, it was a machine, a construct. Like the ones hunting us. No, older, failed experiment. The voice boomed, sudden and harsh. Prohibited knowledge detected. Sanitizing subject Delta 2. Nyra convulsed. White foam spilled from her lips. What's happening? Jaxon caught her as she collapsed. Neural firewall, she choked. They're burning my thoughts. Stop it, Jaxon roared at the ceiling. You want us to survive. Let her think. A pause. Nyra's seizure ceased. The voice almost curious. Subject Delta 2's cognitive access restricted. Proceed. Jaxon cradled her head. Hey, stay with me. Her eyes refocused. You argued with them. Didn't work. No, you bought time. They hesitated. She gripped his arm. They're not all powerful, just arrogant. Outside, the swarm's shrieks reached a fever pitch. Jaxon helped her stand. Can you walk? Barely. He slung her arm over his shoulders. We need to reach higher ground. The cliffs narrow ahead. Bottleneck the swarm. She nodded, clutching her pod lamp. And if we do? He hefted the cybernetic spine. It hummed to life, edges crackling with plasma. Then we take as many with us as we can. The climb was agony. Nyra's legs buckled twice. Jaxon dragged her onward. The swarm pursued, but slower now, confused by the carcass biomatter smeared on their clothes. The bottleneck was a jagged fissure. Jaxon shoved Nyra into the crevice first. Stay behind me. The first wave hit. Jaxon fought like a man possessed. The spine blade seared through chitin and metal. Nyra hurled pod grenades filled with acidic fungus. Screams, smoke, the stench of melting flesh. But there were too many. A winged predator tackled Jaxon, pinning him. Nyra slammed her lamp into its eye. It recoiled directly into the path of a spiked tail. The tail belonged to a new creature. Nyra froze. Oh God. Twice the size of the others. Exoskeleton plated with stolen cybernetics. A dozen mismatched eyes. Not a hunter. A queen. Jaxon scrambled back. Run, now. Together. No, distracted. He shoved her toward a side path. Go. The queen lunged. Jaxon met it with the spine blade. Metal shrieked. Nyra ran. The voice echoed as she fled. Subject Gamma 3, sacrifice protocol detected. Archaic, inefficient. Nyra skidded to a halt. Sacrifice. She turned. Jaxon was losing. The queen's claws had shredded his left arm. His strikes grew sluggish. Nyra sprinted back. What are you doing? He roared. She didn't answer. Ripped open a pouch on her belt, fungus spores harvested earlier, threw them into the queen's maw. Ignite the blade, she screamed. Jaxon jammed the plasma spine into the queen's mouth. The spores detonated. The explosion hurled them both against the cliff. Nyra's ears rang. Blood trickled from her nose. The queen's carcass smoldered. The swarm faltered, leaderless. The voice, after a weighted pause. Cooperation threshold exceeded. Final verdict pending. Jaxon stared at Nyra. You came back. You noticed. She offered a bloody hand. Now let's finish this. Chapter 3. The queen's carcass smoldered, its cybernetic plating sparking and hissing. The swarm, now directionless, retreated into the shadows. Nyra slumped against the cliff, her breath ragged. Jaxon knelt beside her, clutching his bleeding arm. You shouldn't have come back, he said, his voice low. You'd be dead if I hadn't. He didn't argue. The voice returned, colder than ever. Final verdict. Subjects Gamma 3 and Delta 2 demonstrate sufficient adaptability and cooperation. Proceed to extraction point. A holographic path materialized in the air, glowing faintly blue. It led deeper into the cliffs, toward a jagged peak crowned with swirling storm clouds. Nyra pushed herself up. Extraction point. Sounds promising. Or another trap. Jaxon tore a strip of fabric from his sleeve and tied it around his wounded arm. They've been testing us this whole time. Why stop now? Because we passed. Did we? He glanced at the queen's corpse. Or did we just survive long enough to entertain them?
This story continues. Subscribe to our channel, like the video, and listen to the rest.